improvement as well. So this was us. You know that feeling. I don't know if you can see that in the picture too well, but something's coming. And it was very clear from Presbyterian leadership that if we didn't get things aligned, that the days for Albuquerque Ambulance were probably going to be numbered. They love us, and they've devoted a significant amount of financial resources, time, and attention to us, including a brand new base, which is a $4 or $5 million facility. But they can't just carry us forever, bleeding money. And anybody in business obviously can relate to it. So the question then was for us, how do we get from having all the pieces to having something that runs? And not just runs, but works well. And so that was the challenge. Now we did have some advantages, but when you look at it, and this is something you guys probably have all seen, right? We get in a room, what do we want to do? Well, we want to decrease our cost of doing business, we want to improve our performance. And for us, clinical quality cannot be compromised. No matter what else we do, no matter which dial we turn or what we adjust, we have to keep our clinical quality high. On a slide, it's real simple to explain. In real practice, for us to sit as a team and decide how are we going to do those things was a big challenge. But fortunately, like I said, we did have some advantages. Press took the time to bring in a new executive director with a very strong business background. He's the kind of person that understands politics, lobbying for EMS, in addition to being really good at building relationships, which is something we have pretty much failed at in the past. He allowed us to approach our stakeholders as customers, for us to go to the fire department administration and say, what can we do for you? We're here to work for you. That's the idea. What do you need in terms of customer service? What do you want us to do? And what do you need us to do? And we're going to do it. And that has changed things drastically for us. He had good relationships in the industry. He's actually very well known nationally, and that was a huge help to us when it was time to set about the process of benchmarking in our industry. We had a highly motivated team. The fact that it appeared that we may have some numbered days certainly weighed into that. And then we also had 4 green belts on the team, which was a huge help. In fact, I think we had more green belts in our facility than we do any other part of Presbyterian besides Process Excellence, which is our Six Sigma team. And we had good relationships with Process Excellence to leverage the black belts, and also the Innovation Lab at Press, where they're looking at new trends in healthcare and have the ability to set up labs and scenarios and test other things. One cool thing that was lost to me in the moment, and now is like a huge part of what I do, we had the data. We had a great setup for dumping data, and so it was all in there. Anything we wanted to measure, set up, and pivot, we could. We just didn't have the experience to know what it was to set it up and how we needed to look at it. So to start the journey, we knew we had to leverage our relationships. We had to get with Presbyterian and see what they had that we could make use of, like Six Sigma training. We had to leverage our relationships with our software vendor and look at what technology was available that we weren't using that could help us maybe improve efficiency with maybe some spikes in front-end costs, but some huge long-term benefits. We had to change our culture, right? We had to move to a culture of trust and accountability, not a negative, sarcastic, cynical culture, not a we're the best there is and if you don't like us too bad kind of culture, but a how can we serve you? We're here to provide the best customer service there is. Let us know what your needs are so we can meet it. We had to use the process improvement tools. No two ways about it. And leveraging the technology like I talked about with our software vendor. Now we're in a position where they call us to present at their national conference because we use the tool set that they had so well. We're basically free advertising for them. And it's a win-win for us because that really helps us when it comes time to talk about maintenance fees, licensing agreements, and the other things we need for our software. And we had to go out and benchmark nationally. So Pinellas County in Florida is an industry leader. MedStar in Fort Worth is another industry leader. And interestingly enough, UPS, in terms of fleet maintenance and logistics, was a place that we had to go look and see how they were handling because they have a great process for handling vehicles. And that was us thinking outside of the box. So instead of looking at how other ambulance companies or other healthcare providers were doing it, let's look at somebody else that handles a ton of fleet vehicles and keeps them on the road reliably in tight schedules, handling a lot of equipment. And then of course, and I know you guys talk about this all the time, measure. We had to measure everything. We had to really decide what our quality goals were going to be and then just measure it. And as you've seen, I'm sure in your own experience, as soon as we started measuring things and putting metrics up, things started trending towards improvement just by doing that. So that was good, certainly. So just so you guys understand, to give you a brief overview, the way we budget and the way that we look at our numbers, we use a unit hour, which is 1 hour of a staff fueled, stocked, and available ambulance in terms of when we're looking at what we need to provide. This is our widget. This is what we manufacture as a unit hour. $126 an hour is what that costs to provide. And so it gets a little bit expensive. What we need to do is manage that in a rational way so that it fits the demands of the schedule but still meets our financial benchmarks. And then we look at workload in terms of UHU. Unit hour utilization is the national standard for a budget measure of billable transports per ambulance in a 10-hour period. So 4 transports in a 10-hour period would be a 0.40. That doesn't sound like a lot, only doing 4 calls in 10 hours. A call itself takes about an hour and 10 minutes to unfold from the time you call 911 until we're done turning you over to the nursing staff at the hospital, chart signatures and that kind of stuff. The other piece of that is that's not a great measure of the actual work. There are several times when an ambulance responds and it's no longer available in the system and then it's canceled on the way there. The fire department arrives and you might be stable, or they'll go to your house, they'll evaluate you, maybe treat you, and then you decide you don't want to be transported. We don't bill for that currently except for a small evaluation charge, so it doesn't figure into our budget. It's such a small percentage of what we do, really kind of left it as an outlier. And so in terms of work, that's different than workload in the billable sense. You know, this is what pays the bills, was how we have to measure by. Our system was routinely running at about a 0.36. To meet our budget targets, we had to be at least a 4.0. The difference of a 0.01 is about $125,000 annually in terms of what it can save us. So if we can run the system higher, we make more money, we save more money. When we run the system too low, it's too expensive to sustain, and that was the situation that we were in. This also went back to the fact that the admin in certain chairs at that time did not understand the concept and wasn't able to say, hey, our UHU today was X, because they had no measure on it. They would instead sit around days later and say, oh, Sunday it seemed like nobody was really doing anything, and then Friday we got killed. So that was something we absolutely had to address. And we found a couple of good ways to do it. So obviously, you guys are very familiar with root cause analysis. We had to get our own root cause analysis process built in for ambulance. For us, a defect is going to be if we miss a response time. We have response time parameters for a code 3 or lights and sirens response to your house. From the minute you call, we're there on the scene within 10 minutes with at least 90% reliability. That's a national benchmark. That's in the contract that we finally signed with AFD. And so we had to be sure that was working well. And to do so, you got to understand your failures, right? We had to look at each failure individually and see how did this fall out and what happened. So we put together training for the ops and the dispatch supervisors. We put together a new form kind of based on one of our benchmark agencies and started the data collection. We put together, with our software vendor, we betaed a product of theirs called AtWork that we gave to all the dispatchers, the field suits, and the ops that allows us to look in the moment at a call. As soon as you timestamp in your ambulance, which we have a digital screen in the ambulance that tells us when you do X, Y, or Z, go at scene, go en route, go transporting. As soon as you do that, it feeds into AtWork and we can pull it up remotely and look and see your route, your speed, your heading, your timestamps, and then look, okay, where did this break down? Were we too far away to start with? Did we pick the wrong ambulance to send? Did we not have enough ambulances in the system? Did you just take too long to move? You know, and then we had to go out and do field interviews with the crews to get the information we really needed to see where failures had occurred. Go out and say, hey, I saw you went en route right away, but GPS shows your wheels didn't turn for 2.5 minutes. What happened? Oh, well, Starbucks, I just paid. No. Now, fortunately, we didn't have to have a lot of those conversations, right? As soon as that conversation started, that kind of rippled through, and people were like, oh, I need to be paying attention to this. But prior to that, we weren't measuring it, and so nobody cared. You know, patient care was important to the paramedics, but they didn't think of it in those terms. It was, I'll get my Starbucks, and your chest pain will still be there when I get there. You know, this kind of, the show doesn't really start until I get there mentality that we had to address culturally. And so we put that on mobile tablets also, so that our soups could take something handheld that was portable and easy to use out to the crews to do the interviews and show them, hey, here was your route, here was your speed, what happened right in here? And a lot of times that was other helpful feedback. Oh, you know what, on the way there, there was an accident, there was already somebody else there, so we didn't have to stop, but we had to reroute. Or, you know, Academy was down to 1 lane that day, and we hadn't told dispatch, so we didn't have it closed in the CAD. Great, good information. Now we can sit and talk about what actually happened with our failures. And that obviously is going to get us much closer to improvement. With our software vendors, one of the things that we wanted to do was leverage that technology. What you're looking at here is called the SSM, the System Status Module. And what it's basically doing is taking demand, so my historical demand of every call that's been put into our computer-assisted dispatch, and then plotting it out on the map and saying, okay, if I was you, William, here's how I would position my ambulances. By the way, I'm going to use impedance to do an 8.5-minute drive time, because my time parameter is to be there in under 10 minutes. So at 8.5 minutes, that should make those makeable. And then we laid it out in terms of posts in the city, and it looks at what's our access, right? So if I had just one ambulance in the system, I put them at San Mateo and Manal right by the freeway access, because they can hit the 4 directions for the freeway pretty quickly and easily from there. And then it builds your posting plan out from there. The other piece of that was, then I had to roll this into the dispatch center in a way that they can understand. Because what I found was I had employees that have been working there anywhere from 25 years to 6 months, and they all had a different idea about how to put the chess pieces on the board for time of day, day of week. One of our unique advantages in this city is population is very predictable. And really in terms of growth, that's been pretty steady at a small percentage. And so things haven't changed drastically. You know, we don't have a sea. We do have a couple of access points across the river, but there's not a new island. You know, when a new housing development goes up, especially on like the far northwest corner, we'll have to make some adjustments, but we'll actually see that when we run our demand. So very good technology, very powerful stuff that really helped us start getting on top of things.
So does that actually use this real time with the dispatch?
It does.
Okay.
And I actually have it built in, so this fluctuates time of day, day of week. And so as you can imagine, for us being an ambulance company, I should be doing things differently at 3 p.m. on a Friday versus 3 a.m. on Sunday night. Things are different. The population is doing something different, and that's who we're taking care of. And so this allows us to use the most current demand. And this reruns with a 10-week and then a 3-week demand. Plus, it looks at our 4 years of data to show, okay, what's the real trend here? You know, over the last 3 weeks, things changed. Where we really see that happens like in the summertime. As it warms up, people start going to the parks, baseball games, Bullhead Park gets real crowded, the soccer events are going on. In the winter, that's not happening. We see that shift back more towards the residential areas. And this allows us to be dynamic in how we're posting, to be sure that we're the closest to the patients. In dispatch on 2 large wall displays, what I have is this, it's basically a predictive model. And then what it's saying is, at this time of day, this day of week, this is where we need to be positioned, right here and right here. There were a few calls on these outlying areas, but if I had limited resources in the system, put them so they can cover here first and build your plan out from there. The cool thing is, in 4 hours, this will look different. And so my guys that are deciding resource deployment in the moment can look and see, okay, have I covered what I'm going to anticipate and then built out from there, or am I just kind of stuck in this, okay, A, B, and C are always the first 3. This allows us to be much more flexible and dynamic, and obviously equated to better efficiency. Because now if I only had a limited number of resources, they're in the right place. One of the things we saw with this technology too was nobody trusted it, which is exactly what some of our national colleagues have told us. You guys are going to hate this, they won't trust it. As soon as it's right, over 90% of the time, they'll start to believe it. And sure enough, what we saw was as soon as we would have a missed response time, and we go back through and look at the data and say, hey, you weren't really covered to post this area. Yeah, you know, I've been here 12 years, and I always post Southeast second. Yeah, but now we kind of know where we need to be. Yeah, I'll be paying more attention. And we kind of saw that cultural transition, which again improved our efficiency significantly. So this is actually now configured that I have the 2 big wall displays, and then on their 4-screen station, they actually have a duplicate map. So instead of having to look up all the time, they can have it right there in front.